that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Fennell. I am George Harvey, and I will allow Tom Fennell to introduce himself. Silent introduction. Okay. Every day I go through the news, spend actually about 3 or 4 hours going through the news, looking at what's going on in the world. And I keep the news that I think is interesting at a blog, usually put up 10 to 15 items every day. And from those I get the pieces we talk about in the show. And so I think we've got 20 items here to talk about. We'll start on October 3rd,
We've got
Friday.
some good ones.
Yeah, there's always good stuff coming up, or at least interesting stuff, not all of it good. And the first item from Friday, October 3rd comes from Clean Technica. Navigant Research says in a new report that between January 2013 and September 2014, 91 new grid-scale energy storage systems totaling 362.8 megawatts were announced or launched. Lithium-ion technology is most commonly used, but flywheels and flow batteries are emerging as storage options.
Flow batteries are going to look pretty good, I think, in the future.
You know, I look at that flow battery design, and the more I look at it, the more I think this is something that's going to be important.
I think it will. I think it's already important. It's going to be very important.
For those people who don't know what a flow battery is, it's a matter of creating electrical force by having two fluids pass by each other with a membrane in between. And the fluids can go from a storage tank on each side, where fresh fluid is, to another storage tank where the used up fluid is put. And the system is simple enough that you can use it to power a car, which is nice because you can pull into a gas station, a service station,
and change your fluid.
Yeah. And they have flow systems that are absolutely gigantic. So, it's a matter of if you want to, you can recover the fluid and use it over. So that's what they will be doing, no doubt. So these things.
Or as you're charging and recharging, you recharge the fluid.
Right. So you can run it back in the opposite direction.
Yeah, a gazillion times.
It's a gazillion. Yes, that's the limit. It's a gazillion.
Here's the interesting thing. You just mentioned it already. They can be small enough to fit in a car.
Yeah.
Or they can be 10 acres.
Yeah.
or bigger even.
Yeah, they can be extremely large, and they're since the technology on these things is being developed, it's getting less expensive, and also systems are being developed that require chemicals that are not particularly rare, so they're not expensive.
And not particularly toxic or
hazardous. And not particularly toxic. Very interesting stuff. The next item comes from Argus Media. The United States and India are committed to creating binding climate deal this next year, a joint statement from the two nations said. U.S. President Barack Obama and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi held talks in Washington yesterday, that being last Thursday, a week ago today as we are recording this, not as you're going to be seeing it. That would have been October 2nd, at which they recognized the importance of greenhouse gas emissions and improving resilience.
What's particularly interesting here is the amount of funding they're talking about. They're talking about $1 billion.
That's not enough.
No, it isn't, but it's a good start.
It's a start. Yeah, that'll pay the office staff. And of course, we have to put that in context. The last figure I saw from the United Nations said that the fossil fuel industry worldwide is getting direct government subsidies of $609 billion.
I think
per
that's
year.
covered in one of the things we're going to talk about
Is it?
today.
Okay.
I think so. But
It's hard to,
it's old technology. It's been around 100 years. What do they need subsidies for?
I don't know. I think to line the pockets of their stockholders, to tell you the truth. And
Oh, they wouldn't do that.
You don't think so? Maybe they should take the money and line the pockets of their customers.
Not a chance.
Not a chance. Okay. The next one, and this is more than $1 billion. New Jersey Transit has received $1.3 billion in federal funds to improve resilience of the state's transportation system in the event of devastating future storms, which will happen over and over and over because of climate change. The funds include $410 million to develop New Jersey Transit Grid into the first of its kind microgrid capable of keeping the power running when the electric grid goes down. How they can call anything micro when it's $410 million, I don't know. But that came from the Energy Collective.
The only thing that surprises me about that
Yeah?
is why they haven't done this 100 years ago.
Yes, I know.
Because
Well,
the railroad
I can
trains
tell you why they didn't.
are a microgrid.
Yeah, I can tell you why they didn't do 100 years ago,
Yeah.
because I was here 100 years ago, or
Were you?
no, I was here. Certainly, I was around 65 years ago that I can remember. I'm 68, believe it or not.
Uh-huh.
When I was a kid, they didn't need microgrids. They had steam engines running on coal.
But these trains are running on electric.
That's true. So
From
you
Boston
would,
to Washington,
you
these
would-
were all electric trains, even
right?
then.
Yeah, and there's something. Have you ever ridden on the Acela?
I don't think I ever have.
Oh man,
I was on a bullet train in Japan, though.
were you?
Yeah.
How fast was it going?
I don't know, but it was very fast.
Well, I was on the Acela going to Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And as we went through New Jersey, I looked out the window and I could see a superhighway right next to the railroad
And the
tracks.
cars looked like they weren't moving.
The cars, we were passing those cars like they were standing still. And I turned to the conductor who happened to be going by at the moment, and I said, "How fast is this train going?" And he said, "Oh, pretty fast." And I said, "We've got to be going over 100 miles an hour." He said, "Why do you say that?" And I said, "Because those cars out on the superhighway, which are no doubt speeding,
They're probably
80
doing 80.
miles an hour, we're passing like they're standing still." He said, "Yeah, that could be."
I think that Acela hits 130.
I think it does, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we may have been going 130. I think
Yeah.
it's about as fast as it would go. But it, really, I used to go down to Washington very often. And I mean, every month I'd go to Washington, D.C. And because I was living in New Hampshire, but I was working in Washington in a patent office, in a patent attorney's office, I should say, and working on patents. And so I went down there regularly. And if you counted the time that my son would take to drive me to the airport and back, and then come pick me up and go back, along with my travel time, the time the time that I'd have to wait for the plane, and the time on the plane, it was actually kind of a wash. It was the same going
I
down
can
on the
believe
train.
that, but it's more pleasant than the train.
Oh, much more pleasant. Absolutely. You get to see all the graffiti as you come into some graffiti artists are really good.
A little sideline on this is very closely related. They have just found out that the two tunnels that I guess Amtrak operates, or maybe it's New Jersey Department of Transportation, under the Hudson River, got severely damaged in the last hurricane.
Oh, really?
And in order to repair the damage, they're going to have to take one of the tunnels out of service, which the math doesn't compute. That's going to reduce their capability by 75%.
Wow.
Take one of two tunnels out, and they're going to lose 3/4 of the capability. That doesn't make sense, but
It must be that it's congestion. Trains going in opposite
they didn't
directions on the
explain
same
that.
tracks.
But there's only two major tunnels connecting New York and New Jersey, and Amtrak and New Jersey DOT, and these guys all use those tunnels.
Wow.
Now that's not counting the other tunnels, which are the Hudson Tubes.
Yeah.
Which is more like a subway train.
That's the Port Authority Trans-Hudson.
Yeah.
And that is it. It is a subway train. You get out into New Jersey and it goes above ground, but it's a subway. Okay, the next thing on Saturday, October 4th, is from Clean Technica. Suggestions that the current Australian renewable energy target of 41,000 gigawatt hours by 2020 is infeasible have been laughed off by global wind development company Wind Lab, who have released figures showing that it is not only is the target feasible, it could be met by existing approved wind energy that simply has yet to be constructed.
So they got the project sitting on the shelf already.
They've got the projects on the shelf to do it, and we will get back into the Australian renewable energy target in a moment.
There's a couple of things we're going to talk about.
There are
some are crazy, some are a little bit more
well,
sensible.
you know, that's the way life is, I guess. The next item from Think Progress. The cost of solar power plus battery storage is about to dip below the average electricity bill in Germany, according to new analysis by global investment bank HSBC. The bank projects that dropping prices of home solar and home battery storage is about to massively disrupt traditional power generation, which has already been massively disrupted in Germany. And, you know, by the way, anybody, if you want to know what the problem is that they keep talking about, how Germany is in a complete state of dysfunction because of renewable energy going online there, it's very simple. The public is overwhelmingly in support of renewable energy and the Energiewende, the energy transition. 80% of the people are in favor of it. When they thought the government was going to change it, they protested. They had a protest march. And the people who get involved in the thing, which is getting to be almost half the population, are having their electric bills go away in many cases. The people who are suffering the generators.
Yeah.
And it isn't because of the technology. The grid is having problems, not because of technical problems, but because of economic problems. The big businesses can't figure out how to make money on this new paradigm.
Well, one thing that's happening in Germany, and I welcome this, a lot of this is small-scale cooperative.
Absolutely.
You know, a couple hundred people get together and form a solar club or something like that. You know,
yeah, it doesn't even have to be, and you can do that in Vermont.
Yes, it's just starting to happen here in Vermont. It's a great idea.
And I just wrote an article for Green Energy Times about a guy who had a nice field where he had good solar exposure, and he decided that he was going to put up a solar farm. And he had 6 people buy into his solar farm. And he is allowing them to own their own equipment on the property. They get all of the benefits from it, including the tax benefits. And what he gets out of it is they lease a piece of property which is not a whole lot bigger than this desktop.
Okay, so they're leasing land from
They're leasing land
from
him. Yeah, exactly. And the land is not leased for huge amounts of money. They're able to handle that. So he's just renting out property as though it was.
It sounds like one of those deals where everybody gets up from the table smiling.
Yes, it does. So next from the Canadian Free Press, in his speech on the climate change in the United Nations, President Obama stated, quote, "Over the past 8 years, the United States has reduced our total carbon emission by more than any other nation on Earth," end quote. According to data found in the BP Statistical Review, he's right.
But there's a but.
There's a but. What's the but, Tom?
Well, other people are burning the carbon dioxide that we could be burning.
Yeah, well, we're shipping our coal overseas. But, you know, I don't think that's going to last very long because the Chinese, for example, have banned importation of lignite.
Crummy coal.
They don't want crummy coal. And, you know, I mean, the Australian government has been taking the position that perhaps the thing to do is to sell coal in Africa because nobody else is going to buy it. and the Africans, I think,
they're starting ways up, though.
They're not stupid. Okay, the next item, and this is from Clean Technica, Sunday, October 5th. Renewables have been capturing a larger and larger portion of the total global energy infrastructure pie, while the portion nuclear energy has not just been stagnating, but actually shrinking somewhat. Interesting graph.
There's a graph there. Look at the nuclear. It's that damn near flattened out.
It's flattened out.
And wind and solar are hockey sticks already.
Yeah. Now look, that's really interesting because the increase that we have on the right side of the graph, which is wind and solar,
it's starting to take off.
but it looks a lot like what is on the left side of the graph, where nuclear was when it was taking off.
Yeah, exactly. It really does.
Now
yes,
the question
I didn't even
is,
notice that, but it's a carbon copy. It's a mirror image.
yeah, the question is, what are wind and solar going to do in the future?
Well,
And-
eventually they're going to flatten out too.
Well, eventually they will,
But at what point?
Yeah, the interesting thing about this graph is, if you look at the points where it starts to suffer, they're points where people started to get wise to what nuclear power could do aside from generating electricity. And the points at which that happened were Three Mile Island,
Mm-hmm.
and then Chernobyl,
Mm-hmm.
and then Fukushima Daiichi. And we're seeing new nuclear power plants come online, even in the United States. And in fact, we'll get into that later too.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah.
That was the article that I was trying to research.
Oh, really?
No.
Oh, man. Well, we'll talk about it anyway. The next item comes from an organization called One India. There is good news coming for nearly 25,000 Indian villages. This is not 25,000 people. It's not 25,000 families. It's 25,000 entire villages.
6 lakh. 6 lakh of villages. That's accurate.
Okay.
We were just talking about the Indian numbering system.
Yeah.
And a lakh is 100,000.
Yeah.
So 6 lakh is 600,000. There's 600,000 villages in India.
Is there?
Wow.
Well, 25,000 of them still passing nights under darkness due to unavailability of electricity. Instead of relying on power grids, these villages will get electricity by using novel clean energy solutions, achieving the dream illuminating rural areas without grid electricity. That means they're going to be getting wind and solar.
Absolutely.
In the old days being more than 2 years ago, they would have been getting it from diesel. And it would have cost a multiple of what it costs
Absolutely.
for wind and solar.
It's interesting the way this is set up. They're not going to be paying by the kilowatt hour. They're going to be paying a flat rate for them.
Why not?
No, why not?
I mean, the marginal cost
what they're
of
going to be using. You can estimate.
Yeah.
And it's going to be 100 to 200 rubles.
No, not rubles. That's Russian. Rupees.
Rupees.
That's
rupees, which is $1.50 to $3 a month. They're going to get their
Those
basic
poor
electrical
people.
service.
Just imagine paying $3 a month for
Well, that's a lot
electricity.
for them.
It sure is.
But considering what they're getting out of it,
Yeah, well, they're getting the ability to have the kids study under electric light bulbs
Bingo.
at night. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
they can watch television.
Isn't that great? Which means that the government can control their minds. Okay, let's keep going. Now this next one comes from the Boston Globe. New England has always endured high electric costs, but this year's 37% price surge reflects a relatively new problem. As many old coal-burning plants have retired, natural gas accounts for about half of the region's electric generation.
That makes sense.
Utility and customers are both exposed to gas price spikes.
And that was a big problem last winter because it was cold for a long time,
Right.
and there wasn't enough gas.
Yeah.
And they were paying through the nose for it.
And they will be the next time there isn't enough gas too. And my guess is that means already, because the 37% price surge has already been
That's
announced.
what this reflects.
But the thing that really bothered me about this particular editorial in the Boston Globe was that it said, we have to do something about this.
We need more pipelines.
We need more pipelines. What does that do? It exposes them more to the price surges of natural gas.
Yeah.
And it's based on the assumption, two assumptions, one of which is that this is a good interim solution. And the second thing is that the price of natural gas is not going to go up probably because of fracking. And what they don't realize is that fracking ain't what it's said to be. So anyway, there's my opinion.
I got some pictures there I'll scroll through very slowly.
Okay.
But it shows what has happened to natural gas prices in Massachusetts. And they've been pretty flat for the last few years. They actually went down in 2012, but they're going back up again.
Remember, 2012 had a warm winter.
Yeah.
So
well, they're going back up again.
And they are up higher than
they're up
they had
higher.
been.
This is $6. They're up higher than that already.
Yeah, and the national price for natural gas. What in the world is that?
Well, this is a premium that New England is paying for their.
Whoa, that's a big premium.
It is.
Ah.
Well, it's talking about Massachusetts, but they call it the Commonwealth, is paying more for natural gas than many other states.
It sure is. And it's because the pipelines to Massachusetts are old, they're small, they don't carry enough gas to cover all of demand. And so the gas coming out has to be prioritized on the basis of whoever is willing to pay more for it. And,
absolutely.
And so the electric generation companies, which have to produce power for everybody who turns on a light, are willing to pay because they can charge their customers for it.
Well, I get down in Northfield now about once a week to bring in the Commons.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of anti-pipeline activity down there.
There's a lot.
Greenfield, too, because Greenfield, there's going to be 2 pipelines going through Greenfield. One east-west, one north-south. And north of Greenfield is what? It's us.
It's us, yeah.
They don't talk about that pipeline entering Vermont, but if it's going through Greenfield to the north, it's going to come up here.
Well,
which may or may not be good. You know, I mean, there's good and bad of it.
In some respects, it's good. In some respects, it's not good. The thing that I mean, it depends upon, do you want to have the gas, or do you want to do something else, such as not burn it, not produce carbon dioxide emissions? Natural gas is a fossil fuel.
Well, that's the thinking. The thinking is natural gas. This is the way these people are thinking. Well, part of that is they want to continue using the old coal-burning plants, which are easy to convert to natural gas.
Yes, that's
but
right.
They're going to be outflanked by renewables just because renewables, the economics of renewables are there already.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that. So,
moving along.
Moving on. California, this from Solar Love. Don't ask me, I don't know what it is. Never heard of it before. California has just achieved a new record for utility-scale solar power generation. On September 29th, 4.903 gigawatts of electricity was generated by solar PVs from utility-scale sources and concentrated solar power. About 2.8 gigawatts of California solar capacity is not included in this data because it is not utility-scale.
Oh, we skipped one.
Did we? Yeah. Oh, we skipped Unicos, but let's stick on the Solar Love since we're already there. We can go back to Unicos.
California achieves new solar power record.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's a pretty big array, isn't it?
Yes, it is. You could get lost in that array. My grandfather got lost in a cornfield when he was 3 years old, and the only reason they could find him was because the dog's tail stuck straight up in the air. Maybe he
must have been a big dog.
He was a big dog. That thing, you could get lost in there. You could. I have no doubt of it. Unless you've got some kind of sense about where the sun is and the fact that it's always in the south. One of the first things I taught my kids when they started to wander around the neighborhood, the sun is
the sun's always
to the south.
Good point.
Yeah. I mean, it's to the east or west, but it's
there's a funny thing happening with solar power. This is what it says: the costs have dropped dramatically, and new records are being achieved.
Almost regularly.
You might be hearing some overly critical misinformation about high costs or it not being practical. For one thing, and they're just basically stating that, solar power is now much more affordable and it is growing at a fast rate.
Yes, and we've said it many times before, it wouldn't hurt to say it again, in much of Vermont, probably most of Vermont, It's cheaper for a person to buy solar power and get his electricity from that, even if it has to be financed, than it is to buy grid power.
I think we've hit that point right already.
Oh yeah, and Green Mountain Power will help you with the transition.
Well, they're progressive.
They're progressive.
They will survive.
They will survive. While the companies that fight it, you know, it reminds me of, I think it was Darius, or as the English say, Darius, who went down to the ocean, and because the water in a storm wrecked his ships, had his soldiers whip the sea with whips. And that's what I think of when I think of the electric utilities fighting against solar power. Okay, are we ready to go to Unicos?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, let's do Unicos. This came from Renew Economy, also on Monday, October 6th. Unicos is a company that combines different kinds of battery systems with software to provide grid backup. A system of 2 gigawatts providing 1 hour of backup capacity could replace all thermal power plants in Germany that are used for frequency regulation, providing for 60% renewables on the grid.
What's important about that is, of course, the accuracy of the frequency controls a lot of processes, including the electric clock in your bedroom.
That's right, yeah.
So that's important. And the other thing is, if there's an imbalance in power, the first thing that demonstrates this is the frequency starts playing games.
Yes.
Instead of 60 cycles, you're getting 60.025, which may not mean much to you or me if my bedroom alarm clock is off. But you got an industrial processes depending upon the accuracy of that, and it
absolutely.
can cost billions.
Yeah, and people don't realize how accurate some of that stuff is. If you need to have super accurate time, you don't use the grid for electric clocks the way people do with their clocks in their bedrooms. You get it from the Navy, or you get it from satellites or whatever.
It's available over the air.
Yeah, and yeah, that also, I don't know if it's really necessary to do that, to get to 60% renewables on the grid. I think that might be a very conservative number. The sense that I have is that you could get to a much higher percentage than that. Although, you know, I keep thinking about two or 3 years ago when people were saying we'll never go above 20% because you can't keep the grid stable at 20%.
Yeah, well, that's what turned out to be a lot of nonsense.
Yeah.
But I certainly think the time will come. I don't think you and I will see it, but the time will come when it's all renewable.
I don't know that we won't see it.
Well, we might.
We might.
We might.
I kind of, not 100%, but
Well, that's what I'm saying.
I kind of, yeah. Well, yes, okay. If you're going to go to 100%, yeah, I don't expect to see that. But I wouldn't be surprised if somebody came to me and said, "Well, we've hit 99.8." You know, and that has to do more with economics than anything else. Okay, Energy Collective came up with this little tidbit. You might not picture former Secretary of State George Shultz as someone who drives an electric car or has solar panels on the roof of his home, but he does.
Can't picture him. There he is up on the screen.
Yep. And Shultz has become a vocal proponent of action to combat climate change. He brought that message to MIT in a talk on advocating further efforts.
He's got his degree from MIT.
Well, good for him.
Yeah, he's got
it's
a
nice
PhD.
to know that somebody in government has got a degree from someplace other than Yale.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah. Although, you know, when I was a kid, it was Harvard.
Yeah, you're right. Now, Schultz has been a mover and shaker in alternative energy or renewables.
Do you suppose he's the guy who got George W. Bush to put solar panels on his roof? They took them off the White House, but they put them on the roof of George W. Bush's home.
No,
that's what I've been told. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know. Please don't sue me.
Well, Schultz hung out with HW.
Yeah.
He was in the HW administration.
Yeah. Yeah. He's an old guy now. Might even be older than me.
Oh my God.
Okay, the next item from Triple Pundit. On Tuesday, October 7th, at least 54 gigawatts of U.S. offshore wind energy generation capacity could be deployed by 2030, according to a new study published by the DOE, which focused on helping DOE achieve two goals. First, reducing the cost of offshore wind energy, and second, shortening the time required to deploy wind generation capacity. Now,
that 54 gigawatts is basically just the Atlantic.
yeah, that's the Atlantic. People, we should make sure that people understand this. Offshore wind has got a better capacity factor than onshore. It'll generate.
It blows more frequently.
Yeah, you get more power more of the time. But since we're talking about the entire east coast of the United States, the wind's always going to be blowing somewhere.
Somewhere on that coast. There's a picture up there, and it's not showing up too well. But if you look at the pictures, all of the pictures on the left are the same picture there. They're the U.S. East Coast.
Right.
And there's a whole bunch of little dots.
Yep.
And each one of those dots represents not a windmill, but a wind farm.
Yep.
And it's showing how they will be growing.
Yep.
Over the next,
say 15 years.
I think it goes out to 1980.
Oh, 2080?
2080. Yeah,
okay.
I think so.
Well,
but in any case, they're going to be growing. They're going to be growing. They're going to be growing. On the right, there's a different graph, and it shows that during the same period of time, the onshore wind's going to be growing about 6 or 8 times as fast.
Well, there's a lot more onshore sites where you can put things.
I will bring that
and
picture up next.
And the people who, yeah, there you go.
These are the
Poor
sites.
Vermont.
And you see the little dots on the right. Those
Yep.
are your offshore shots.
Yep.
And the ones obviously on the left are the
color on the
land-based.
left is the land-based.
The darker the color, the more capability to generate wind power in that particular location.
Right. There's not a lot.
They're not counties. I don't know what those squares represent.
You'll notice
districts. I guess you're going to have to.
Yeah,
call.
there's not a lot of wind power being shown from Vermont, especially when you can compare it to some of those other places.
Well, the heavy wind power, as you can see, is in the center of the country.
Right.
It's right up and down the Great Plains.
Right. With an interesting amount of it in Michigan. That red area in Michigan.
Probably because of the lakes.
Yeah, they have, and Michigan's relatively flat. They have. I'm told that you can go to Michigan and go on a bus tour that will take you on a tour of the wind farms.
That I've read that too.
And it's actually
so much
kind of
for
popular.
Wind farms killing tourism.
Yeah, I guess. Okie doke. The next item comes from the Recorder, and I guess that's Greenfield, yes. And it says here 2 agencies in western Massachusetts, and I want to talk about this one a little bit. The Franklin Regional Council of Governments and the Connecticut River Watershed Council are intervening in a proposal to allow Northfield Mountain Hydroelectric Station, which we've talked about a number of times, temporarily to boost output by pumping and releasing more river water at its mountaintop reservoir.
Well, this is in response to last winter's debacle where there just wasn't enough power in New England. And
right.
Everybody was paying through the nose for it.
Right.
And nobody anticipated the winter was going to be that cold.
Right.
I mean, after all, it's global warming. We're not even supposed to have winter anymore.
Yeah.
But in any case, in response to that, these guys want to be ready. And
yes.
They're going to store some more power. And they're going to do that by raising the upper level and lowering the lower level of the amount of water in that reservoir.
Okay.
And I'll give it back to you because these guys are fighting it.
Well,
I don't think they're fighting much, though.
The thing that they're complaining about is fish being killed.
Well, yeah, you know, these fish are 5 feet long. They're shad, right? Tell us what the fish are.
The turbines that run this thing are really, really big. They're really big turbines. In fact, when they were put in, I think it was 1972, they were the largest hydro turbines in the world.
I can believe that, yeah.
They were just gigantic.
State of the art.
Yeah, they were state of the art. They were put in because of Vermont Yankee, which had to put its power on the grid steadily, completely inflexible. So this is a way of making Vermont Yankee, and not just Vermont Yankee, but it took power from the surplus power from Millstone and Seabrook and Pilgrim and whatever, Indian Point, and used it for moving water to the top of that reservoir. And then, during the daytime when the power is needed, run it back down again, put the power on the grid. Now, what we're talking about is fish kills. And I'll put this in the context of the nuclear power plant on the Hudson River, Indian Point. There was an argument last year between the state and some of the environmental groups and Entergy, which owns Indian Point, about the number of fish that the plant was killing every year.
Mm-hmm. It was astronomical.
Well, the power plant the Entergy was saying, no, we're only killing 100 million fish.
Uh-huh.
Where the state was saying, you're killing 1 billion fish. Now, you got to understand, the fish they're killing are not 5-foot long fish. And to put this into context, when a golden shiner minnow lays eggs, it lays them in the thousands. Mm-hmm. All right, and the strategy of doing that is they want lots and lots of eggs. This is Mother Nature.
Because a lot of people eat those eggs.
A lot of people eat the little fish, and as a matter of fact, the little fish go out, and if you watch them grow, some of them grow really fast, mm-hmm. and some of them don't grow at all. Mm-hmm. They go out and they nibble on
algae.
Algae, plankton, phytoplankton, zooplankton, anything that's in the water that they can eat. And the stuff they eat will fit into their mouths, which are so small that their parents and their bigger siblings would just not eat anything of that size. And when they get eaten, what they've done is they have harvested to feed their parents, to feed their larger siblings. If you think about population explosion, the golden shiner is laying thousands of eggs every year. Thousands of eggs are hatching every year, but you really only want 2 fish from one female in order to keep the species going at a constant level.
How many?
2.
2?
2.
Wow, okay.
So the next generation will be the same
all
size.
those thousands of eggs.
A female golden shiner could, and this is a minnow, could lay 20,000 eggs. So what are you going to do with all those young? And the answer to that is they're going to go out and get food to bring them back for mama.
Okay.
They eat their own children.
Okay.
It's a slightly different paradigm than the human beings go by. It's a little difficult to understand, perhaps, but it works. You want lots and lots of small things for the big fish to eat, and that includes, Well, when you start killing 100 million fish in a situation...
Sounds like a lot.
It sounds like a lot until you realize that these things are 1/8 of an inch long, and they look like an eyelash. Okay. A lot of them. And you see a little dot on one end. That's a pair of eyeballs.
Yeah.
But, this little thing is tiny. And that they're out there in nature in order to be food for somebody. And yes, it's unfortunate that a power plant would kill food for somebody, but I think we have to think in terms of the power plant in other respects besides the fish population, because there's so many of these things. It's hard for the mind to take it in.
Yeah.
And the Northfield Mountain plant is there. It uses more power than it produces, clearly. That's every battery does
without
that.
saying. Every storage device takes more to store than you get back out of it, but that's not the point.
But this thing can store power coming from solar panels, wind turbines.
It doesn't care where the electrons come from.
Exactly. It's there to even out the load.
So without Yankee, this is not obsolete. I mean,
no, it's not obsolete.
It's going to perform a good job in balancing the power as more and more renewables get.
Right. Now,
attached to the
obviously, I'm interested in fish.
grid.
You know,
Yeah, you are. You're right.
I'm interested in all kinds of things. Deer, you know, opossums, honeybees, you name it.
Alligators?
Alligators, I'm interested in
In
alligators.
college, we used to toast the male alligator
Okay,
because the female alligator lays 1,000 eggs.
okay.
And the male alligator eats them all but one. So if it wasn't for the male alligator, we'd be up to our necks in alligators.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
It's very similar to what's going on
It
here.
sure is. I'm interested in fish. I'm interested in making sure that the fish are in good shape. But before I oppose this, this is what I'm going to say. I'm not going to say I am in favor of this thing against all opposition. Before I decide that I oppose this, I want to understand the situation better. I want to understand exactly what's going on.
Well, this has been there long enough for the people to have dealt with the problem of fish kill.
Oh yeah, they know what they're doing.
So what they're doing is they're increasing the capacity of this thing by what, 5%?
I don't know.
Maybe 10%?
Yeah,
I doubt
something like
it's
that.
even 10%.
It's hard to
in
know.
In the wintertime
yeah.
when they know they're going to need more power.
Yeah, and it's hard to know exactly what's going on because we don't know that they're actually going to do that. They're just looking for permission to do it.
They want the ability to do it.
They want the ability to do it.
And
Furthermore,
when we have a warm winter, they may not need it.
Furthermore, there are not a lot of baby fish around in the winter.
I didn't even think about that.
And furthermore,
You're right.
yeah, furthermore, we don't know what facilities they've got for screening fish out of this. We do know that they've got some. I don't know what they are.
They keep the big guys out.
They keep the big guys out, but how big is the big guy? I mean,
Big enough to damage a turtle.
James, yeah, right. James Perkins was here a couple of times showing us his hydro thing, and it would screen out the fry of just about anything.
Right.
And I'm sure that the Northfield Station, the Northfield Mountain Station, is not that selective, but at the same time, they are not interested in pumping fish back and forth. Okay, should we go on?
We should go on.
Okie doke. All right, this brings us up to yesterday, October the 8th. And this is an interesting thing. Britain won EU approval for a new nuclear power plant at Hinkley Point on Wednesday, allowing the government to commit 35 years of financial support to Europe's biggest and most controversial infrastructure project. EU commissioners from at least 5 countries voiced opposition to the plan. I think the Irish are going to sue. We have a story on that later. I guess it's not in here, but it was at the blog today.
Okay,
And
I don't remember seeing that.
Yeah, it was at the blog. geoharvey.wordpress.com
the
for
big
those who are
problem
interested.
here seems to be the amount of subsidy they're throwing at
Oh,
this.
it's unbelievable. You know, for anybody who thinks that nuclear power is inexpensive,
Take the subsidies away.
take the subsidies away and see what happens. This plant, Hinkley Point, is only working because they got a subsidy that gives them a guarantee to sell that power at double,
very high price.
at double the normal wholesale rate.
Somehow that seems like a sweetheart deal for somebody.
Sure does. And it's going to cost $24.5 billion to put those reactors on. I believe there's 2 reactors. They're big. The 2 reactors are about 5 times the size of Vermont Yankee. But $25 billion is a lot of money. It's going to cost over $1.5 billion just to tie them to the grid, which is not that far away.
Wow.
Just to tie them to the grid. The grid is going by this place.
Yeah.
This is where there's already 2 nuclear reactors there. And it's going to cost them $1.5 billion just to do the grid tie. You'd think that they'd have something better to do with the money.
You scratch that one, I'm sure you'll find some well-connected people behind
Well,
it.
you will find well-connected people behind it. But the interesting thing is, when they guaranteed that rate, it did not guarantee the plant because nobody in Europe was willing to put up the money. So where did the money come from? It came from China.
Did it really?
Yeah.
Wow.
There were investors in China who were willing to take the risk.
I'm reading the article, which I don't have it all up here, but there's several more stages of approval they have to go through.
Well, not only
before
that.
This is a reality.
Yeah, not only that, but it looks like Ireland is going to sue. They're really interested in this because it's not that far from Ireland. It's just across the Irish Sea. But Austria has said it is going to sue.
Huh, Austria.
Austria, and
Okay.
it has to do with money. It's
Yeah.
just the money that's
Well,
involved.
where's this money coming from?
English taxpayers, Scottish taxpayers, Welsh taxpayers.
Probably EU taxpayers.
Well, I don't know how much of it is coming from the EU, but honestly, this just strikes me as an enormous boondoggle.
Well, this
And-
article talks about 5 EU commissioners from at least 5 countries voiced opposition to the
Yeah,
plan.
yeah.
So they must have a vested interest there.
Yes. But I think that what they're interested in doing is, I don't know what they're interested in doing, to tell you the truth. I don't know enough about it. But there it is. Okay. The Natural Resources Defense Council gave us this. Offshore wind power is not usually associated with low-cost energy, at least not in the public imagination. But it turns out that installing 54 gigawatts of offshore wind power,
That same number.
same number,
54 gigawatts.
which we were looking at earlier, off the American coast, East Coast, can cut the cost of electricity in the United States by an astounding $7.68 billion a year.
It's not here, but I remember reading in the article that amounts to about $100 a household.
Yeah. But for this,
If they pass this
for
on
the
to the
whole
customers,
country,
yeah,
everybody
gets
party.
$100.
Yeah, we could have everybody could have pizza once a week. I mean, once a month, just on that.
I'd go for that.
Yeah, I would too.
Bring
Absolutely.
me anchovies.
Yeah, right. Okay. The next one is from Platts. This is an interesting combination of things. As the drought in California continues to strain the state's hydropower resources, natural gas and renewables are locked in competition to determine which will capture the lion's share of the lost hydropower capacity.
That picture up there is a reservoir
Oh my gosh.
in California.
In
We've
Cal-
seen this picture before.
Oh
And
boy.
it's probably one of the worst cases.
Yeah.
But it's real. This is happening. They're in a big drought over it.
It is. It's terrible. It's 4 years old. 100% of the state, and maybe that a little teeny tip of it got out of severe drought or hard drought in the last week, but almost the entire state is in severe drought or exceptional drought, which is worse.
Absolutely.
And that's where our vegetables historically have come from. So if
So
you
this
go to-
article says that hydropower typically accounts for 20% of California's in-state generation.
right.
During the first 6 months of each year from 2004 to 2013, 20%. During the first half of 2014, hydropower accounted for only 10%.
So they're down
they're cutting it in
50%.
half.
Yeah, and you know, there's a little thing going on here that people don't realize when they think about natural gas stepping in to take over the hydropower. Natural gas
it's expensive.
comes in 2 forms. One is cheap, one is expensive. The expensive form is the peaking plant, which is generally a turbine, where you burn the gas in the turbine, and the exhaust just goes into the air. The natural gas that's inexpensive is more like a coal burning or nuclear power plant, where you've got a big boiler.
You're boiling water with
You're
it.
boiling water, and
Yep.
you have to get rid of the excess heat.
Yep.
And that excess heat is generally taken up in water.
In water.
And they don't have water to take up the excess heat. So at
didn't
some
think about
point,
that one.
at some point they're going to have to put a cap on the amount of natural gas that has nothing to do with gas availability,
There
or
won't be enough water.
there won't be enough
'Cause
water.
If they're using it to cool the reactor,
That's right.
they won't be able to grow vegetables.
That's right. And on
Wow.
top of that, they've got fracking going on in California, which is
We're
supposed
also
to be
using water.
Yeah, and that uses a lot of water. And then they've got fracking going on that is in freshwater aquifers, that is destroying the freshwater aquifers, making it impossible to pump the water out. They don't know to what extent that is happening. So basically, if this drought continues, I think California is going to have to fall back on solar and wind, and that's
what they
basically
said here, despite
and geothermal.
hydro generation falling 31% below the 2013 mark, gas-fired generation, what you're talking about, has only seen a 2% gain. So where's this coming from? Renewables have led gains in the California independent system operator generation.
Okay.
Renewables grew by 15%.
No, they didn't.
Compared to the 2013.
Yeah, they didn't. Guess what? You're talking about grid power.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all these guys
we
measure.
touched that earlier. You know,
Right. You're right.
There's the
The
renewables.
independent system operator doesn't care what you grow, what you generate on top of your roof.
Yeah.
They don't even consider it. And it's probably as much or almost as much as the big guys are generating.
Well, we actually had the figure earlier when they set a record.
We didn't talk about it, but yeah.
Yeah, it was, what was it? It was, here we go. 4.9 gigawatts on September 29th. And about 2.8 gigawatts of California solar capacity is not included in the data because it's not utility scale. Mm-hmm. So this has really confused a lot of people, including people in the utility industry, from what I have read. There are major companies that are designing the future of their operations based on information that they're getting from the U.S. government, which excludes
It's
rooftop.
not the full.
It's not the full thing.
Full picture. Yeah.
And so, you know, and
So
that
they're
can
gonna
be
make some mistakes.
They're going to make mistakes. And if you're in a position where a minor mistake of doing something like that makes the difference between having a market that grows by 1% or a market that contracts by 1%, that can make a huge difference to your bottom line.
I would think.
That's
yeah.
It becomes magnified in the bottom line. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, now we're up to today. Thursday, October 9th.
Bingo. That's
which
today.
is not today for anybody who's watching this show, but it's today for Tom and me, and that's enough to call it today. The U.S.
Well, the first one we've talked about already, but
Yeah. The U.S. DOE has issued a presidential permit for the 1 gigawatt Champlain Hudson Power Express transmission project, which will deliver hydro generation from Quebec in Canada, in case anybody doesn't know where Quebec is, to New York. Should I say Quebec?
why not?
No, say Quebec. Please, all our northern neighbors. To New York City. How should I say that to please people in New York City?
New York.
Okay.
New York.
The buried 333-mile line, it's an HVDC line, high voltage DC, will run the length of Lake Champlain and through parts of the Hudson River.
This is fabulous.
This is really interesting. And you know who opposed this? Entergy. They don't want that line running under the Hudson River.
This is going to interfere with fish.
It's going to interfere with the fish that are on their bottom line. The billion of fish or the 100 million fish that are being killed every year by Indian Point. They want to make sure that that doesn't happen to more fish that will be killed by stray power from an HVDC line buried 6 feet deep in the mud.
Yeah, this thing's not just going to lay on the bottom of the lake. It's going to be buried. It's going to be protected. So you're not going to worry about anchoring your boat and pulling up a million cans.
And there are various kinds of critters that will actually eat their way into a submarine cable.
Well, there are such things, yeah.
They aren't...
Tornadoes.
Tornadoes.
Tornadoes. It's a boring worm.
A boring worm.
T-E-R-E-D-O.
Whoa. I knew a boring worm once. Oh, well.
There's a couple of stories. There's a side story to this.
I knew you'd have a side story.
Well, first of all, this isn't still cast in concrete because the president has approved it, and he has to because it crosses the international boundary.
Yes.
But the Corps of Engineers now has to approve it, which I think they will.
They probably will.
But the second aspect of this is there's a parallel line being proposed that's on its way also to get approved. It's going to go down through Lake Champlain to the bottom of Lake Champlain, at which time it goes over into Vermont and ties into the grid in Vermont.
Wow.
And
That's
someone's
interesting.
behind this one.
Yes.
It's going to happen too. So
Yeah.
we're going to have two large transmission lines going right down the bottom of Lake Champlain.
Wow. We've got about 4 minutes, so we have two of these to get through. One of them, this is important, I think, but maybe it's going to turn out not to be true. Reports yesterday claim the government, this is the government of Australia, has ditched the Warburton Review, which called for renewable projects to be scrapped or phased out. Talks between the government and Labor to save the target have begun on both sides, with both sides agreed to exempt the struggling aluminum smelters from the RET costs.
Aluminum uses a lot
That
of
from
electricity.
Warrnambool Standard.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's the first thing I've had from the Warrnambool Standard.
That's the name of the newspaper.
I think so. What this means is that the attempts of the government to stop renewable power in Australia are at this point looking like they're going to fail. They have extracted one of their chestnuts from the fire, which is this gift for the aluminum smelters. But it looks like the renewable industry in Australia is going to get back on track. And if that is the case, it's going to get back on track very fast.
I think, and we've talked about this, it seems like the Australian people, it seems like the local Australian governments, they're all in favor of renewable power.
Yeah, this is.
But the big state governments and the national government is opposed.
Yep.
And I think it's ideological more than anything else.
This is a big black in the eye for Tony Abbott, who's the Prime Minister, and a few other people.
We'll now see at the next election, but it looks like he's doing some stupid stuff.
He may be ditched by his own party.
Yeah.
We may see another Prime Minister coming up. Now, the last thing I want to make sure we get to, this is from Alt.
According to this, we've still got, it's only 2 minutes, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the wrong one.
Yep. Alt Energy Mag, which is not a local magazine for Brattleboro, but nevertheless had this story, which is very important to us. Less than 5 months since breaking ground on a new 2-megawatt solar project in Brattleboro, Vermont.
There it is.
Is that Brattleboro?
That's Brattleboro. That's the project in
That's the project.
That's Technology Drive. That's
Yep. You can see that from Route 91.
Chickering Drive on the top.
Yep. Although
that's 91.
Yeah, and it's not, as I understand it, having not gone by there lately on 91. My understanding is that it's not really in your face.
Barely visible.
Yeah.
You got to look for it.
When Stanley Enterprises was joined by development team members and supporters to officially mark the project's completion, the system will produce about 40% of Brattleboro's immediate electrical needs on a clear afternoon, about 8%, I should say that very clearly, of the total needs of Brattleboro on a year-round basis. And this was done locally by
Integrated Solar.
Integrated Solar, yes.
I got a little
and there was a company from California,
REC Solar,
which is from California.
The team is Win Stanley, who owns the land.
Yeah.
And I was there briefly at the meeting yesterday.
I couldn't go because of work I had to do for Green Energy Times. It's just it's
I didn't
crazy
stay long
hectic
because
right
I had
now.
my newspapers to deliver, and
Yeah.
it looked like they were fixing to give about an hour's long of speeches.
Yes. Yep.
But Win Stanley owns the land, and they had originally planned to put a YMCA there
Really?
at that location.
Yeah.
And
okay.
that got shot down. You probably remember when it was talked about in the newspaper. So they said, what are we going to do with this land? It's not much good for agriculture, you know.
Not much good for anything, really.
They didn't say this, but the topsoil's been removed. Somebody sold the topsoil a long time ago.
Oh, boy.
So they looked at it and said, this looks like it makes good sense.
Yep.
Integrated Solar is a Brattleboro company.
Yep.
And they built it. They basically built it. REC Solar was the general contractor. They put all the deals together, got the permits and everything.
Bye,
else.
people.
Is that it? Is it over?
Yeah, we're getting to the end. We're bye, and we will see you next week, I trust, or you'll see us. We spin and we toil, we work all day, Sowing and reaping, we store goods away, so we can be dressed well on the day that we die.